It's in Leicester, on this shabby industrial estate, that 40% of BooHoo's clothes are made. Last year, many of its suppliers were mired in allegations of slave labour. It's a world away from BooHoo's glamorous image, selling cheap fashions to its young and trendy customers. The backdrop to its adverts is America, a lucrative market that's now under threat. US law is tough on imports of goods made with forced labour. US Customs is being urged to ban clothes from BooHoo and much of its supply chain in Leicester until proof they are made without exploitation. That was news to factory owner Saeed Khilji. He said a US import ban would hurt, but insisted working conditions had improved greatly.
If American government taking any action, and if they have enough evidence to do that, then yes, there will be an effect. But I'm sure now on, there won't be a problem in Leicester. I'm 100% confident on that.
British lawyer Duncan Jepson has asked for two bans, one on BooHoo and one on most of its suppliers. US Customs has told him there's enough evidence to start an investigation.
What obviously we'd all like, those of us who are interested in the improving labour conditions, is for BooHoo to really get to grips with the governance of their supply chain, to ensure that there is no wage theft, to ensure that people have proper contracts.
BooHoo has 14 million online customers. Last year, its profit soared to £92 million. A fifth of its sales were in the United States.
If your business model is that your supply chain's making people work for much less than the minimum wage in appalling working conditions, and you're undercutting the marketplace, that's unfair competition, and you're driving legitimate businesses out of business, and that should never be allowed.
In a statement, BooHoo said, the group has not been notified of any investigation by US Customs and Border Protection, but we are confident in the actions that we are taking to ensure that all of the group's products meet and exceed the CBP criteria on preventing the product of forced labour entering the US or any of our markets.
One of the issues that Leicester reveals is that the brand, BooHoo in this case, has no legal responsibility for what happens in its suppliers. And I think that's of concern. And I know a lot of people in the UK think the law needs to be strengthened so that they are in some way more responsible for what happens in their supply chain.
40% of BooHoo's clothes are made in Leicester's factories. The company says it has already taken action against 64 suppliers who did not meet its standards. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Leicester.